come to see you about whatever problem you had before you walked on stage. They paid to see you, and they looking for your best. So whatever's going on with you that's not pertaining to your act, you leave it in the dressing room.
Oh, I know there's division. So do I wait for your decision, though? Or do I let you go?
Person they were intended for, to their best friend, or I was very manipulative and very sick because I didn't have words to express how hurt I was oftentimes.
Nah, shucks. Hi, this is Clara Wagner with Talk Back for Teens. Today we're here with Tegan, who's a part of our series where we're talking to 20-something-year-olds who look back on their experiences with depression and other mental illness, and this goes along with our month-long theme on depression.
And I felt like I hurt really bad, and I didn't know how to express that. I felt like I was hurting worse than my peers, and so I'd write it, and then that way it was out of me, but then I still couldn't handle a lot of it. And I don't know, it was just, I feel like there was a lot of other things going on, and that made me very manipulative and very, just not a nice person, I guess, and I would just, try to use some of my illness and some of the things that came of my illness as, fodder towards other people, and it just wasn't very nice. And I think that's why I liked being in creative writing so much, was because people were, would listen to it. And, people usually didn't get that it was about them, and then I'd get mad about that, and then I was, self-righteous anger.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but, a lot of it was, punishing myself, I guess. That's what it ended up being, was, well, you didn't write well enough for them to understand that it was about them, or you weren't clear enough, or, you know what I mean? If you were just a better writer, they would know what they did to you, and...
Yeah.
So yeah, and then it would just turn to punishing myself, and that was kind of my MO.
And would you feel like it was them letting you down by not picking up on it?
Yeah, in some ways, I think a lot of my attention grabbing and my manipulations and things of that nature were kind of in this really crowded, shrouded, I should say, hope that someone would know that there was something wrong with me, and it would get me help.
Right.
Or someone would say I've been through that too, and here's how I got out. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't getting that kind of validation, and it was really hard. And then when I wouldn't get that from people, I would feel like they had stabbed me in the back, they had let me down, they had all my relationships were very polar, and very hard to deal with, because everything I did was so affected by my emotional state.
Yeah.
I felt when things were okay, when my depression wasn't so bad, things were I would live for that. That was when things were just status quo, I loved that. That was better than ice cream, and and then because I just expected depression most days. I just expected to be completely overwhelmed and to not want to get out of bed. I expected that most of the time. Mm-hmm. So normalcy was a treat.
Right.
So my relationships I usually held on to too tightly, because I was maybe if I can just make this relationship last, just both friends and intimate, and even school relationships between teachers and myself, and anybody who would talk to me. It was if I can just make this relationship work better, or stay the way it is, or just keep status quo, the depression won't come back, because I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah. And I feel you mentioned that your poetry was almost a way to try and slip in a cry for help, but it wasn't direct enough where people would necessarily get what you're trying to say, and then that would kind of create this cycle. So, and I feel you see that a lot with people who are struggling, who try in these essentially often ineffective ways to say I'm struggling. But what do you think kept you or keeps people from just saying I'm struggling, I need help?
I feel for me personally, there's been two big roadblocks, and one was not having vocabulary, because I'd never heard anyone in my life say that they were struggling or that they needed help, or I'd never seen anybody go through mental health services or anything. Like, I had no idea. Like, I just assumed I would get locked up. And then there came a point when I was no longer afraid to be locked up. And I was like, I just kind of broke down, and it was really messy and really awful. And I really wish that people didn't have to get to that point to get help.
Yeah.
That I had to go to. And then the current point that I'm at where I keep myself from getting help is like, but I'm in recovery and I'm doing so well. And
Right.
like, it's almost like it would be the opposite to say like I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Like, I have to continue to get better all the time. So I feel like there's like this pressure, and I don't know where it comes from, to always be doing like better than you were before.
Right.
And I don't know if it's like, if this is something people who aren't afflicted with depression feel like. But like, I feel like it probably is. There's always a strive to do better than like your last best. But like, I feel like it's very cultural that like you just have to always be on top, and it's really hard to always be on top.
Yeah. And trying to be is exhausting.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
And holding yourself to that standard often just works against you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Talk me through when, like, you started being depressed, and when you figured out that what was going on with you was indeed depression, and kind of like how it started, I guess.
That's a really good question, because like for a long time, like even when I was a child, I was very like prone to crying, prone to being nervous, prone to not wanting to talk to others, but really gravitated towards talking to adults. But like my peers made me so uncomfortable. And like that was like kind of something that I've heard a lot in people who also have depression, is that like my peers made me so uncomfortable, but I could talk to other groups, or I was better by myself. Whereas like I feel like some of my peers who aren't afflicted are maybe not so much. Like they were very social, and I had like weird times where I'd be very social and then very not social, and it was all a reflection of my mental health. And that started really young, like the ability to be very social, and then all of a sudden like not wanting to talk to anyone at all. And it's hard for me to untangle my depression from trauma, so it's just really hard to say when it started. But I know for a fact that when I was 11, there were becoming bouts of like not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to go to school, and then like panic attacks and temper tantrums and whatever else you may have to keep me from going to school, because the idea of just facing the day was exhausting.
Yeah.
And like the temper tantrum seemed less tiring than facing school.
Yeah. Were you able to put a name on it at that point?
No, my parents told me I was stressed out. They thought it was because I was having trouble at school, but I think I was having trouble, like when we look back now, we kind of realize I was having trouble at school because I was having emotional problems. And so I think I ended up seeing a doctor like 6 months into that school year, like almost the end of the school year. And we told the doctor that I was stressed out, and they gave me like a stress ball. Like, it was really ineffective.
Like, the help they gave was a stress ball?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
I know. But it was because they just thought that, like, I think none of us had the vocabulary to say, like, this is what's actually going on.
Right.
And it was really just, like, uncharted territory, and I thought this is what stress felt like. I thought this is what, like, adults went through when they couldn't pay their bills, or, like, this is how adults must feel when they're stuck in traffic, or, like, and I was just getting it early.
Right.
I thought I was growing up fast.
Yeah.
Because I had heard adults use stressed out to describe a lot of adult situations, and, like, I kind of thought that was maybe a privilege, and I was trying to, like, spin it all these weird ways, and all I was doing was making myself feel worse.
Right.
Like, spin it different ways, so, like, it was more palatable to me, but it just made me, I didn't feel any better.
Yeah.
And without treatment, I got worse. I had a couple friends who had said, you know, maybe you should seek psychiatric help, but they themselves were people I considered to be really unstable.
Yeah.
So I didn't really take their advice very well. Like, I kind of chalked it up to, like, well, they see this in everybody because they're in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they want everyone to go to therapy.
Right.
And then when I was 17, things had just kind of gotten so out of control that I was in, like, a really rigorous course at school, and I was looking at either dropping out of this rigorous course at school that, of course, I needed to get into college to be my dream career. Like, everything was, like, riding on this.
If you didn't do it, your life would be over.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And so I was like, I think I really need to get some help. And my parents were, like, baffled. They had never dealt with this before. It was really difficult, and basically, I think we ended up going to, like, the phone book or something. Like, we didn't know what to look for. It was really uncharted territory for us. And we met with a doctor, and she scheduled a 90-minute appointment, and I spent probably 89 minutes of it crying. Because because I was so just overwhelmed. And she started me on medication, and that was really, it was so weird because it didn't help right away. Like, I thought it was going to be like I would wake up tomorrow and I would be functional.
Magic happy pill.
Magic happy pill. And instead I was kind of, I started this journey instead.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that and everything that's come of it. But I really thought that, like, I had no idea what I was starting or what was going to happen. And I had, and she started to give me, like, facts about what depression was and wasn't. And she gave me proper diagnoses, too, which I had never had.
Yeah.
So from 11 to 17, I was just kind of, like, assuming that I was just a little off.
Yeah.
Or just handling life poorly. And now I finally had, like, a name, and that was kind of a relief.
Yeah. How do you feel like kind of just, like, our general culture or the way that our society operates kind of feeds into being sick or maybe being healthy?
I feel like our culture definitely feeds into being sick because there's this whole, like, we don't talk about it. There's not a lot of information out there. And since the information that's out there is wrong, like my high school health class and even my college health class were not adequate in covering what mental illness was and kind of help perpetuate stigma.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that really sucked. And, yeah, so I feel like there's just this, like, huge lack of understanding. And I think that's what people who are sick need the most. You know, like, and I mean, I even think it's, like, a huge, like, blanket lack of understanding. Because I feel like the thing that people run to a lot is, like, well, if I had diabetes, you would understand. Well, people with diabetes even get misunderstood.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Because, like, people, like, our society is very geared towards a healthy person on all levels.
Yeah.
So, I just think it's, like, it's really sad. It makes me sad when I think about it. Because there are so many people who are in one way or another are not well and are sick one way or another. And it's a lack of information. It's a lack of education. It's, and I think it's a lack of tolerance too, which I think is the scariest one because it's like you come up to something you don't know and all you have to do is like maybe ask the person, like validate their experience.
Yeah.
And I haven't had a lot of that happen to me. Mm-hmm. I've had a lot more of like, well, here's how I think it should happen.
Right.
Versus, oh, well, you lived this. How do you think it should happen?
Yeah.
And I think that the second one's much more effective. So in terms of like drugs and alcohol, I definitely used it to try and alleviate my symptoms, and I can't tell you if it did because I used them to such an extent that I would black out. So if they were helpful, I don't know. But I kept turning to them because the blackout seemed better than being conscious and feeling my pain.
Yeah.
And that is like a really, like, it's really dangerous. Like, I've had, like, lifelong problems. Not lifelong, but, like, I'm 23 and, like, I still have problems from when I was, like, having these, like, epic binges.
Yeah.
You know? And, like, I have migraines. Mm-hmm. And, like, migraine headaches, and, like, that's, like, a neurological, genetic thing. Like, everybody in my family gets them. And mine are so much worse than everybody else's, and I think it's because I just wrecked my brain.
Uh-huh.
You know? And, like, for me, the other thing is that, like, I couldn't, like, I didn't want to get out of bed to start with. Like, try not wanting to get out of bed and then being hungover.
Right.
Like, it was awful. So, yeah, it was just, and, you know, at some point I did go through and address, like, how I use drugs and alcohol to cope with my feelings. But that was, like, really just, like, not fun, and sometimes I feel like it's unnecessary, like, and there's nothing that's really effective either. Like, I did a lot of Googling when I was, like, starting to run out of things that were working.
Right.
And I just kept realizing that, you know, like, everything that I was using, whether it was opiates or it was alcohol, like, I used a lot of downers, and they weren't going to make me happy. And then the uppers have a serotonin kick that makes you depressed, and, like, you end up depressed no matter what. Right. So it's like, if that's where you gotta be, that's what you gotta be.
Yeah.
And, I mean, not to say, like, you have to be depressed, but, like, drugs and alcohol are not the way out.
And they get you out, yeah.
Yeah, like, proper treatment's gonna get you out.
Yeah.
And there is no quick fix for any of it. Like, even proper treatment takes time.
Yeah.
I wish there was a quick fix. God,
Yeah.
give my left arm for it.
I know. Yeah. Parents or friends or siblings or whatever who are looking at someone they care about and saying, like, I think she's sick, or I know she's sick. Kind of like, what do you have for them?
It's gonna sound dumb, but there was this thing. I don't remember which website. I think it was from NAMI. I don't remember. It was from one of those like health organizations, and it was like an 8-question screener or something. Like, do you have depression? And my mom had to take one as part of a visit for something, and she was like, I realized that you had all of them.
Yeah.
Like, they were all just, like, there's only 2 that she couldn't answer because they were internal questions, but the rest of them I had. They were very visible. And that was part of how she would talk to me, because there was a point when I was in recovery and I was a couple years into it doing really well, and then, like, it kind of just came for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do, and so I was, like, kind of just trying to stay afloat. And she's like, you know, you don't seem to enjoy things as much as you used to. And, like, that was where she got her vocabulary, was from the screener. So I know they're all over the internet, and I know they're everywhere, but, like, that was, like, super helpful.
Right.
It was just for her to be like, you know, you are matching these symptoms.
Yeah. Right.
And for her to know what actual symptoms were.
Exactly. Yeah. Just Googling it. Yeah.
For myself specifically, if I could go back in time and talk to little me, I would say, you know, I don't want to, like, try harder. Because I feel like, not try harder, like, try harder to be happy, but, like, I felt like a lot, like, maybe be louder, talk more. I think that's what I want to say.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I would take what adults said to me as a reason to stop talking. And I just wish I had kept talking and not shut up when I would say, you know, I feel really bad, and they would say, you're just stressed, and I would be quiet. I wish I had kept saying, no, I really feel bad.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like you said, finding your voice. I wish I had just talked a little bit more so I could have found my voice a little sooner.
Is there anything you think you could have done to kind of stop your spiral of getting sicker earlier?
There's a couple things. I mean, there's a couple things. And, like, kind of what immediately comes to mind is, like, I could have tried to self-medicate less. And then, like, when I got put on medication, I could have tried to not play doctor as often, because I would often, like, adjust my own medication as a means of, like, this isn't working and I can't see her till, you know, 2 weeks from now, so I'm going to just start messing with my own meds. And, like, that ended up making me so much sicker than anything.
Yeah.
So, like, that, like, turnover period I was talking about was usually coming off of, like, drugs that aren't pharmaceuticals. Yeah. And then trying to mess with my own prescribed drugs, and like, that was not safe.
So I absolutely want to get into the journey part and the recovery part, but first I'm wondering, because like you said, 11 to 17, you know, like, that's 6 years of you know, untreated, undiagnosed depression. So how did you how did you function?
Poorly. Really poorly. I did a lot of things to try and alter my mood. And it was anything that would make me feel better, basically. So you know, it was anything from, like, making sure that I was the best in my class, which would wear off. You know, like, being the best gets old after a while. Right. So then I would, like, drop to being, like, almost the worst in my class, and being the worst gets old after a while. And, like, these extremes were kind of what kept me going. And I started developing really bad coping mechanisms, is what ended up coming from chasing these different highs that I could attain through, like, normal everyday life and, like, things my peers were trying, and it was really difficult. I ended up with a lot of really weird things. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say weird. I ended up with an eating disorder, and that's been really difficult. And I feel like that was, like, a coping mechanism. Right. For the depression. Absolutely. And it still is. Yeah. So, I came up with a lot of really bad coping mechanisms, and I looked for my identity in places where it didn't exist, like in other people, and, like, So it wasn't until I was able to cope with my depression and like a couple years into coping with my depression that I was able to kind of decide who I was. And it's really hard when everyone else is kind of like finding their way in high school, and like it's almost like you don't have a way to find.
Right.
So it was a lot of really bad, I say bad choices, but just like maybe choices that like I wouldn't condone if I had a child.
Yeah.
I'd be like, these are dangerous, these are not safe, these are,
Right.
you know what I mean? I don't want to say they're bad because I feel like that's really judgmental, but I feel like that's the typical parent word for them.
Yeah.
Most of the time they actually ended up hurting me in the long term.
Right.
Because I just didn't know what I didn't know.
Do you have a way of describing what it's like to be depressed?
It feels like it's never going to end. That's like the main thing. Like, I can't describe the feeling of being depressed, but the main thing is that it feels like it's never going to end. Because I could say like I've heard people be like, oh, it's like the worst day ever, or like it's not even that though, because good things still happen when you're depressed, you know. But sometimes for me it's like it's like Groundhog Day. Like it's always gonna be this way for the rest of my life, and then it's almost like this fear kicks in that I might live forever.
Right.
You know, like I might
just
always
have to keep doing
to keep doing this.
Right.
And then that's kind of when like really bad thoughts kick in, like suicidal ideation and like self-injury, because it's like I will do anything to not live like this anymore.
So, talk me through how your journey of recovery is going. You know, what you found helpful, what you tried and wasn't helpful. I know for a lot of people, recovery is not linear.
Yeah.
So kind of your experience with the process and always being in the process of recovery.
Yeah. So like I said, when I was 17, I first sought psychiatric help, and we tried medication first because I wasn't really willing to do therapy. I kind of thought that I still had like a stigma about that, but medication seemed more like, well, people have heart problems and they take medication, so like maybe I just have a brain problem and I'll take medication. And then like eventually down the road, it was realizing that like all the trauma, all the coping mechanisms I've developed were really not helpful. And I think I got serious about therapy when I was probably just after I turned 18, so like a year later, because I would realize the meds were working just a little bit, and I was still acting the same.
Yeah.
And that was really difficult because it was like, well, now my depression's not really a good excuse for my bad behavior, and I'm still acting this way, and I'm still feeling a lot of other feelings that are associated, like the depression's kind of like the core feeling, and there's like these accessory feelings, and those accessory feelings were still like rampant.
Right.
So that was really difficult, and it took a while to find all the right practitioners too. Like I didn't realize how long that would take. I think it took me up until probably 18 months ago. I'm 23. So I was 20, just about to turn 22 when I figured out like all the practitioners I needed, wanted, and put them all in place.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of like interviewing people.
Yeah.
And that was really like, I did not realize that. I didn't realize I could ever tell a doctor I didn't like them and didn't want to see them anymore, because I had been with a couple of therapists, so I was like, I have to keep going because I need to be in therapy.
Right.
But I wasn't willing to work with them.
Right.
Because I didn't feel that connection. So that was like, it was a lot of learning, and I wish there was a handbook on this. I really wish there was. I wish there was like a guideline or a rule book or something, but there isn't. And a lot of it's like discerning what you need, because part of what was really helpful for treating my depression was going into intense trauma therapy and treating my eating disorder, and both of those have so many different spin-offs on them of how they can be treated. It was like, well, how do you like to be treated?
Yeah.
What's your preferred method of treatment? And I was like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
And like having to try all of those.
Right.
Just to figure out what you like.
My experience is like you show up to these people that are professionals and you expect them to say, okay, you're going to do this, this, and this. And instead it's more of like, well, like, what do you think you should do? And like in my experience, like, I don't know. I feel like my life is falling apart. Like, and you expect me to know this? Like, no.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it was really like weird, and I feel like there was some wheel spinning that happened as a result of me just not knowing anything. But I kind of got, I guess, a little brave like I don't know what else to say, but I was just like, I will try anything, so just start putting me in stuff.
Yeah.
Or we'll start trying things, or I stop saying no to things that I thought maybe I didn't need. Because there came a point when I was in so much pain at like a year and a half, 2 years into this, where I was like, I don't really know what's going on. I don't know what I'm doing. And it was after a hospitalization. I was just like, I obviously don't know what I'm doing, because I ended up in the hospital and this was my best work. Yeah. So I'll try whatever. And they tried a different kind of medication that I had kind of stigmatized. I had said, that was for really crazy people. And it turns out I am a really crazy person. So it's actually okay. We're not so bad.
Yeah, but less crazy now that you're on a medication that works.
Yeah, a lot less crazy.
Do you think another part of the process was also finding a voice?
Yeah, definitely finding a voice. And it was really hard because I feel like there was a time when my voice was almost, I don't want to say it was worthless. It was uneducated. So even if I had words, like a toolbox of words I could pull words from, they wouldn't have meant anything. You know what I mean? So it was something that had to come with time. And that was really hard. And it was a lot of like learning to speak over people and learning when to be quiet, and like, because when I was hospitalized, it was a lot of me talking over people, because I don't know, who's been hospitalized and who hasn't been, but like it's not a very fun experience. Right. And it was really hard to get my needs met there. So but it was the really cool part was after that I had learned how to talk over doctors. Whereas before I thought you always were quiet for every doctor you met. Yeah. So that was a huge part of my recovery, of learning my voice, and then also learning, like, it was a weird thing, because like I was like, okay, I ended up here because I'm not doing anything right, but also part of me not doing anything right was me not talking enough. Right. So yeah, it is finding your voice, but there's no right way to find your voice. It's something you have to just discover as you go.
Right. I've heard different people who think about it differently. Some people who are more of the group that's, okay, there's kind of like an end point, and at someday I will be better, and depression will be something that I had but don't currently have, or same with eating disorders. Do you feel like you'll get to that point, or do you feel like it's more of like an ongoing, this will be a part of my life until the day I die? It just depends on how big of a part it is.
So I've given this a lot of thought.
Same.
So I've given this a lot of thought, and like part of what I've come to realize, like a lot of reading, is that my brain, my frontal lobe, isn't done yet. I'm only 23, so like it's not done cooking, and so I don't really know what's going to happen.
Right, what the end products is going to be.
So I mean, maybe like when I'm 30 I can think more about this question, and I think that's kind of like my sanity answer right now, is like, you don't know what you're like. Yeah. Like you're still neurologically becoming the person you'll be. I'm finishing up a treatment group for my eating disorder, and the first day of the eating disorder group, they pulled up this thing about a woman who had fully recovered, has no like ideations of eating disorder, and I yelled bullshit. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
Okay. And I yelled bullshit, and because I was just like, like I could never see myself being separate from it, but that's today. Like today I'll never, as of right now, I can't see myself separate without these things, because they're part of who I am, but maybe I'll grow out of them, or maybe I'll grow more into them. Like, who knows?
What role have the people around you played? You've talked a little bit about your treatment team. What about in terms of friends, family, etc., in terms of the supports they were able to provide, the challenges that they provided, and kind of how you've learned to work them into, or maybe out of, your recovery?
Turning 18 was great. It was really important, because I feel like once I was legally an adult, it changed a lot of the way I got care. And it was not that my parents didn't want me to get care. It's not that they didn't think this was a good idea. It was that they had no vocabulary, they had no knowledge, and they didn't have a ton of time. I have a sister who's very active in her schoolwork and her things, and so it was really hard for them to like just have time to learn these things and become part of this world, whereas like this was my world. Yeah. I didn't have anything else to do. Yeah. So I don't really fault them for not being completely like, mental illness savvy.
Hands-on, yeah.
But it was really cool being able to choose my own care. And I would say that now in this process, when I'm more stable and I'm less reactive, they're much more interested, they're much more willing. But I feel like when I was more reactive, it was really hard for them to be a part of my care because, you know, it's just me constantly pushing people away, having outbursts, and then locking myself in my room for 3 days.
Yeah.
So that's like, that was my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's really hard when you live with somebody, you know? And then there's like my sister and my friends who have just been like this unyielding fountain of support, and I don't know how they do it. I can't do it for other people. It exhausts me. But it's like, it's a lot of people who all try their best is basically what I'm trying to say. It's a lot of people who try their best, and then there's how I interpret it.
Uh-huh.
So some people I interpret as more supportive than others, and that's okay. And it's kind of about how I share my time with them.
Yeah.
Because there are some people who think they're very supportive, but they're just jerks. But,
Yeah.
you know, that's how they're going to be. When people are trying to be supportive and they're just jerks, it's usually because they think they know what they're talking about. And they either have no experience or have little experience or are just really biased. Like, for example, I have a friend. She's very nice and in all ways, but when it comes to my depression, she has no concept that, like, I can't just snap out of it.
Right.
So a lot of times, like, what ends up happening is, like, instead of us talking about my depression, it becomes like, hey, I'm depressed. I'll let you know when it's over.
Yeah.
Because the time she's tried to be supportive, it's been like, well, let's just go to the mall.
Yeah.
Like, well, you just need to get out of the house. You just need fresh
Right.
air. And it's like, no, I really need to, like, honor my feelings right now.
Yeah.
And, like, I think going to the mall would make me feel worse.
Yeah.
And I think the other way that people are jerks is when they don't acknowledge that it's mental illness or that's an actual disease and they think I'm just lazy. I think that is the most hurtful is when people don't acknowledge that I'm sick. I'm, like, getting upset just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just, like, it took me so long to accept that I was sick and that things are not easy for me and that this is something I have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
That for people just to kind of, like, spit on that is, like, really hard, and then they don't even see what's wrong with their behavior, so you can't even talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Like, it's another thing, like, when I have people who are supportive who maybe aren't giving me the right kind of support, and I can be like, hey, that wasn't what I needed. I could have used this. And they're like, I will try my best next time. But
Right.
people who don't see the error in their ways are just really frustrating.
Yeah. Right. Invalidating, you know?
Yeah, incredibly invalidating.
Being sick, how much is that a part of your identity and kind of like who you see yourself as?
It's becoming less and less a part of my identity. But part of that is because I'm able to do more and more. Like, for example, there was a time when all I was doing was treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very much a part of my identity that, like, I was very sick and I really needed help. And, like, if you couldn't help me get better, you couldn't be in my life. And, like, that was my identity. And, like, and then I started going to school and I was a student. But I was also a sick student. But I could have classmates and I could have other people in my life who served other functions. And then, like, I got a job and I went to school. And now I have a career. And it's, like, these things grow.
Yeah.
And I get these other identities. And then, like, as people start to come into my life because I'm able to have these reciprocal relationships because I'm not so devastatingly ill that I can't have reciprocal relationships.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be things like an active sister and I have 2 best friends.
Yeah.
Like, who has 2 best friends? Me. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool, you know? So it's cool to fill these other roles.
Yeah.
But there was a time when I don't think I could have filled any other role than just a sick girl.
All of the work that you put into being better, whether that meant during a period of success or a period of struggling, what do you think are kind of some of the biggest things that you've taken away from that?
So, like, what have I taken away from, like, my struggles and successes and
Yeah, from your journey.
from my journey? I don't drive the bus. I am not in control. I'm very powerless over this whole thing, and it's very humbling. You know, and there's a lot of reasons I believe that, and part of that is because, you know, what's wrong with me or what's different about me is that it's a biological disorder. Like, I have no control over that. Like, it can just happen. And some people are like, if you eat enough carrots, it won't happen and whatever. But, like, I don't really like carrots anyway.
Like the
I know,
new big
bacteria.
thing. Like, oh, have pickles and you'll be fine. Like, oh, well, if
Pickles.
only I knew.
If only I had just eaten, like, a jar of pickles every day when I was 13. But no, but yeah, so, like, I don't really have any way of stopping what goes on inside my brain, like, at a biological cellular level.
Yeah.
So at that level, I'm totally powerless. And then, so I can't stop it from happening. And then when it does happen, like, there's this really cool glimmer of hope that happens where it's like, I can't stop this from happening, but I can sort of change how I deal with it. So, like, it's almost like I'm powerless over circumstances, but I have power over myself. Like, I have power over my reactions. And that was something that, like, that kind of level of empowerment was really amazing. By admitting that I had no control, that everything was just, like, you know, like, just turn over the wheel.
Yeah.
I got to be empowered, and that's been really amazing. And it's not linear. It's a lot of me pretending I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then trying to take it back.
Yeah.
So my first real therapist came from a college, and he transferred out at the end of my year there, and he was part of the reason I left school.
Okay.
Because I knew I couldn't continue to see him. And he left because the school was like constricting how students were able to visit him. He didn't ever say that to me, but, like, it was pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So that was college. And then high school, they were just awful. In 7th grade, I had friends starting to turn in, like, anonymous notes that I was not well or that I was harming myself. And I would get called out into the office, and I would lie to them, and they would just let me go, and they wouldn't call my mom. And I think around, like, the 10th one, they called my mother. I was, like, in 8th grade. And my mom was like, you gotta stop, the school's calling. Like, she was just so tired by that point. It had been over a year of me being really sick, and she was like, the school's calling. I don't know what to tell them. And I can't lie for you much longer.
Yeah.
And so I stopped making friends, because the idea of getting in trouble with my parents was so terrifying.
Yeah.
On top of being sick. And then when things got even worse, like around my senior year, I started seeking help from them, because the psychiatrist who I had seen was like, well, if you really need to talk to somebody in a pinch, your school has a psychologist, psychiatrist, somebody. And I got turned away a couple times because she was busy. And I was, like, crying, like puffy snot.
Yeah.
They told me to go back to class. And, I just really felt I had no support at school until I started meeting teachers who were different. So I didn't get support from the places you're supposed to get support, but I had a couple teachers who were, like, I think they either knew personally through, I don't know what they saw in me, but they would tell me that I could always come in their room. And I'm getting upset. There was definitely one time in my senior year I went into a chem teacher's room and I just cried. They had, like, a galley kitchen for, like, setting up experiments, and I just went there and I cried for, like, 20 minutes. And then she, like, set her class on, like an unplanned group study thing, and then she came in and she just sat with me, and, like, that is, like, one of my favorite memories from high school. So I found support, but it was like I had to kind of advocate for it. No one came looking for me. Yeah, it was really scary. It was all very scary.
Has it changed the way that you go through the world, whether that be the way that you interact when you're on a coffee date with a friend, or the way you deal with a bad day at work? You know, how has it kind of changed those kinds of things, if that makes sense?
Yeah. It's, like, so weird that you just asked that, because I was literally just thinking about, like, if I deal with things differently or if this is how everybody deals with things. Because I have to actually deal with them now. And that's, like, I have to actually process and cope with everything that happens to me, or happens around me, or happens to somebody next to me, because I'm very, like, codependent and touchy-feely. But I think what's really cool about this whole thing is it's made me just more, I think the word's empathetic. Like, I can just understand more experiences. Whereas, like, maybe the person who's, like, who is an unsupportive jerk for not understanding, like, I have a one-up on them.
Yeah. So
that's, like, been really cool. And I I think like your example of like the coffee date with a friend or like a bad day at work, like both of those, it's like I think I come to both of those with like your feelings are valid, and then also the experience of but it could be worse, which is not like to like rain on anybody's parade, like it's not, but like you've been through worse and you've survived it and look how far you've come.
Right, just being able to step back and have that perspective.
Yeah.
What have you learned in terms of how to cope with all the bad feelings that are kind of just a part of life?
I do a lot of like venting, like to people that I really love and care, and who love and care about me, because I feel like if I keep it to myself, it makes me a lot sicker.
Yeah.
So just being able to tell them like, hey, here's what's going on, even if it's irrational, like I am feeling sad because, you know, my car didn't start.
Yeah.
And it feels overwhelming and like the world's gonna end.
Yeah.
And then having them say like, your feelings are valid. It's like, oh, thank God, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I am, but it's okay.
Yeah. And
like that word crazy is also like kind of important to me, and I'm comfortable with it, but not everybody is, and I understand that. Venting, and then like also like putting things in perspective, and then also learning when to take a break, because my biggest like I guess like the hamartia of my life is like not being able to take a break from things. Is like just picking at it until I'm sick, the people around me are sick, I've damaged a relationship in my life that's important to me, like so being able to step back and take a break and be like, you know what, I'm actually getting tired and overwhelmed, and this is all a function of my depression, I need to go chill. Or like being able to say, you know, I'd love to go on a hike with you, but I'm feeling really sad today, and I feel like if I make myself do this, I'm gonna just really be a Debbie Downer. Is actually more important than like making myself do things.
And I think that can bring you closer to people too, because it sets the expectation that like we don't always need to be okay for each other, and like we can be not okay, and that's okay. Yeah. Like that emotional honesty. Right.
I'm super about that.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I'm curious, you mentioned that crazy has been an important word for you, and that some people aren't comfortable with it, but that you are. Could you expand on what crazy means to you and where it fits into who you are and what you've been through?
Yeah. So my mom used to say I was getting crazy when I was like acting out or having depressive phases, or for me when I was like unmedicated, sometimes my depression would kind of have like a swing side to it, where I'd be a little bit, I don't want to say manic, but I'd just be like energetic, because mania is not part of my diagnosis, and I don't want to misuse that word, but like it was like super energetic, super upbeat, and it would last for like 6 hours, and then I would crash and sleep for like 2 days.
Yeah.
Like just crazy, right? Like this is a word we use in our vernacular. And yeah, and like I was so unhappy when she would call me at first, because it was so hurtful. It was like invalidating. But it was the only word she had to describe me.
Yeah.
And it still kind of is. Like she doesn't, like a lot of people in my life don't have a huge vocabulary for mental illness, and so I can just say like, oh well, you know, I'm kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And then they're like, what does that mean? And that opens the door for the conversation of, I have depression, it affects me in these ways, it can change this and that, but it also makes me very normal because now I'm in treatment, or like it opens a lot of doors. That conversation does. And I also think it's a good way to like just make light of the situation, and I'm super grateful that I can make light of my depression. Not everybody can.
Yeah.
But I can today, and that's super good news.
Yeah. After you explained it, I realized I have like the same thing but a different version, so I say jacked up. So like I'm just a little bit jacked up, or everybody's just a little bit jacked up. And that's like, I don't know, that's my version.
Borrow that.
There you go. Do you like it when people ask you about it? Are you comfortable talking about it?
Up until like 6 months ago, it was super uncomfortable.
Okay.
It was kind of like I would really like to talk to treatment team members about it, but I was super like in contact with them. Like when things got bad, I would immediately like, you know, like after hours phone line or like whatever, or schedule a new appointment. And I thought that was really how I was supposed to deal with it. And then I got offered to do like a multifamily group therapy kind of deal. And that was really cool. And they said you can choose your family. And I got to bring my 2 best friends with me. Nice. And I didn't think it through, because that meant I now had to share with them,
Yeah.
like, all my feelings.
Yeah.
And it was really terrifying, but it's cool because now we have like, we all have the vocabulary because we all have gone through different things, and they've watched me grow and stuff, and you know, my one friend has been friends with me for 10 years. She's seen it all, so she knows everything. But like, being able to giving her the permission to ask me about it was so important, and I never knew that she was waiting for me to give her permission.
Huh.
So it was just like, it was such a cool experience, and like, but it also changes like how I get close to people.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are some people, like, I gotta, like, feel them out first before I let them know if I have depression or not. Because there are some people who still stick to that stigma so hard, and I'm like, you know, I'm just here to do my job. Like, when I'm at work, I really don't like to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I'm just here to do my job and go home. I work with the public, so it can be really hard when the public comes in and they're talking about their struggles, and I'm like, I really want to, like, you know, help you and tell you what worked for me, but at the same time, like, I don't want my coworkers to know.
Yeah.
Because I'm at work.
Right. It's keeping
Boundaries.
Figuring out where your boundaries are and then kind of doing the dance of keeping them.
Yeah. So that's been really hard, and yeah, so it does change how I interact with people. I feel like when I was earlier in this journey, like my first job, I told everybody I was in recovery, and then I ended up in the hospital, and I feel like that was like a good turn of fate because they were like, oh, well, this is just what happens, and I was like, yeah. But like, I really don't want to live like that anymore, and I like my privacy a little bit more now. I'm also not, you know, 17. Life's a little different.
And I think a lot of the time, mental illnesses are kind of like this enmeshed bundle of different things. So kind of what's been your experience with having multiple diagnoses or the relationships, you know, between depression, anxiety, bipolar, PTSD, eating disorders, kind of like all that stuff where you see so many people, you know, having some elements of lots of different things.
Yeah, that was a huge, like, again, another huge struggle for me because I was like, I have so many things wrong with me, and no one else has multiple things wrong with them, so like, I'm so different and so special in the bad way. But like, none of that was true. Like, as soon as I started talking to people who also had mental illness through different avenues that just people I would meet, they were like, no, I also have multiple diagnoses, and like, so just knowing that I wasn't the only one was really comforting. And then also realizing that, like, it's going to express itself in different ways. And maybe I have to treat things in different ways, too. Like, it was really, like, the PTSD has been really interesting because that comes in cycles.
Yeah.
So I can almost, like, set my watch with it sometimes. Like, it'll come for, like, a couple weeks, then it'll go away for, like, a month. Then it comes for a couple weeks, and then it goes away. And, like, that's just how it works. And the depression comes whenever it pleases. Like, there's no cycle to that. And then the anxiety is like, you know, like, did I get enough sleep? It's very like, are my basic needs met?
Yeah.
So, it's just a lot of things like to watch, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's also like, again, like that vocabulary, like, it's not even a vocabulary, but like that internal, like, set of tools and words that I can use to be like, this is definitely this part of my, you know, mental illness, and this part is like super comforting. Yeah. Just to be like, it's not the world ending, it's just this side of my mental illness. I kind of view it as like one piece with multiple sides instead of like 800 things inside of me.
Yeah. Do you separate yourself in your mental illness? Like, is it like I know sometimes be like, okay, this is my voice, this is the eating disorder voice, but do you do that with the eating disorder as well as with depression or the PTSD? Like, do you separate them and say, okay, these are things that are not me, or is it, this is me, they're just a part of me?
I think to some extent it's all a part of me, because like I exhibited like a lot of characteristics that I have from a pretty young age. Like, you know, like I've always kind of been a little bit manipulative, and I've always kind of been a little bit shy, and I've always kind of been at the same time really outgoing to keep you like looking not at me on the inside, but like a different part of me. So it's like a really weird question because I've always kind of been this way, but at the same time, like, I'm learning to distinguish those voices. But at the same time, again, it's like I don't want to ever shirk responsibility. Yeah. And that's my fear because being like a connoisseur of treatment, I've seen people who have used like it's not me, it's my disorder as an excuse to stay sick, and I don't ever want to fall into that trap. So that's my big fear. But that's me. If it helps other people, I hope it helps them.
What did you find to be harder? Do you find to be harder being kind of in the pits of being sick and experiencing being sick, or the work of recovery?
That's a really good question. Being sick for me ended up being a lot of work. Because I was so young, it was a lot of like keeping people looking the right direction while also keeping my grades up, while also applying to college. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just, the time, like, when I was really sick, I was having to do a lot of things to keep people from looking too close at me. Because I was also very afraid of, like, being found out. And like I said, like, being locked up, that's the only option I thought there was. You know, being sent to a sanitarium or something, and that was pretty terrifying. So, there was a lot of, like, upkeep in, like, my illness just to keep, like, things looking normal.
Yeah.
And that was exhausting. But then there was kind of, like, this changeover period where I didn't care about looking normal. And I was, like, really focused on recovery, but I was also still so sick that I couldn't really figure it out. And like I said, there was a lot of stumbling with finding vocabulary and treatment providers. And that was the most exhausting period of my life.
Okay.
So that weird turnover, I think, was the most tiring. But, like, the kind of the space I've entered now where, like, I have, like, treatment providers and kind of know I have enough diagnoses to have stuff to work on. Like, doing the deep digging to actually, like, work on those is actually less exhausting and more rewarding for me.
Yeah.
So it might be harder work. I don't know. But it's so much more rewarding.
Yeah.
That it doesn't necessarily feel as exhausting as, like, keeping all the plates spinning just so I can lay in bed.
Right.
'Cause that's not very rewarding.
Yeah. And having the light at the end of the tunnel, too.
Yeah.
You know, I think often that's a more hopeful part of the process, and I think that just having some element of hope, you know, can really energize the process. Speaking of hope, what was your motivation? You know, and obviously there are lots of different motivations that come and go, but kind of when things were really bad and really dark, what were kind of some of the things that would keep you going?
That's, like, a really hard question because sometimes I don't know. One of the ER docs, when I went at my last psychiatric visit, my last psychiatric visit was 2, actually. I went in and they turned me away, and then I went in again like 12 hours later. But the first doctor, when he turned me away, basically said, you know, you've been doing so well. Whatever you've been using to keep you alive, you need to keep tapping into that.
Yeah.
And those words have kind of stuck with me because there was something that kept me alive for a really long time, and I really did not feel like being alive.
Yeah.
I really did not feel like doing this anymore.
Yeah.
So I feel like there was something intrinsic in me that was really helpful. I don't know what that is. The other answer I have for you is that I have a little sister who is, you know, like the apple of my eye. She's super into, like, all kinds of things. Like, she goes to school now. She goes to college now, which blows my mind. And, like, I just want to be around for all of her college events. And, like, in high school, she was super active, and I wasn't able to be a part of her, like, high school career.
Yeah.
So, in some ways, it's like you got to show up for other people now. There's a sense of service, like, showing up and stuff.
That's so much of what I think support is just being there. Whether or not that teacher knew what she was doing, that was her way of saying, listen, I care about you, so I'm here. And that's just such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is. And I feel like that's really what I wanted from people, and I feel like the message I got by being even when I say it, like, being handed off to guidance counselors and stuff, or being turned away, was like, there isn't room for you here. I crashed down somewhere that was so bad I don't ever want to go back there again, and it's really motivating, like, now. But I don't know that I needed to go there.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of my depression, I don't know that I needed to feel that bad to not want to go back, because I was pretty sure that I didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
When all those things started.
Right. Your rock bottom could have been higher.
Yeah. Could have been higher.
For anybody who might be watching this, whether there's somebody who does struggle with some kind of mental illness or people who don't. Do you have any kind of like messages to them?
Your feelings are valid. Yeah. I don't know. I wish someone had told me that what was going on with me was real when I was younger and not just dramatics or antics, or even if it was dramatics and antics, that it was coming from somewhere very real.
Right. It was serving a purpose.
It was serving a purpose. So your feelings are valid and what you're going through is legitimate. So keep going.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Clara Wagner with Tegan for Talkback for Teens. You can watch more and join the discussion at talkbackforteens.com. Thanks a lot. No.
Pain comes lonely, weekend shoulder, been here
Yeah, there's no safe
before.
place.
Mopped up, stepped down, so prominent, so loud, I can't.
But I do want to answer.
The Clara awkward part.
Only my mind, so wide-eyed other side, I can't be home. Rain comes, priceless.
Yeah, it was really scary. It was all very scary.
Been here before. If I could be good
A
enough,
huge lack of
then I would be
understanding.
blown away.
And I think that's
And I could
what
be there
people are sick
everyone.
need the most.
And I could be there every day. If I could be good enough,
What am I saying?
then I could just glow. If I could let go, then I could change the world. But I can't stop always tying myself down. I can be good enough. Yeah, I will break ground. I focus on the dawn, man.
Feelings are harder than
Something
people think
doesn't
they are.
feel right. I feel it in my bones like God is
Cool.
throwing stones. Yeah, I'm gonna find the light. And the weight of what you're going through is bigger than your will to change. You have to start somewhere. Despair won't wear well ever again. If I could be good enough, then I would be blown away. And I could be there everyone. And I could be there every day. If I could be good enough, then I could just glow. If I could let go, then I could change the world. But I can't stop always tying myself down. I could be good enough. Yeah, I will break. Proud, calm, loud, strong.
A huge lack of understanding. And I think that's what people who are sick need the most. Yeah, it was really scary. It was all very scary.
If I could let go, then I could change the world. But I can't